Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornborough, and today I'm joined by Steve Rice. And Steve's a homesteader up in Michigan, and he's got a little business going on. He's doing some pretty cool things. And why I wanted him on was mostly because he just has a real passion for a few topics, especially, and from what I can tell from Facebook. And I wanted to talk to him about it. I thought it'd be real interesting. So, Steve, welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
Hey, thanks a lot, Harold. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here and just looking forward to sharing my passion with y'all.
Yeah, before we get into those things you're most passionate about, I guess, I'd really just love to hear your story, your journey, what got you interested in homesteading to begin with and got you where you are.
Yeah, sure. So we'll go back, maybe 10 years and, just kind of give you the whole spiel. So we used to live in town in just in like a subdivision, a regular neighborhood, and I think for like a lot of people, the way it started for us is my wife had a crazy idea to make a pallet garden. I don't know if you've ever seen those where you kind of dig out the ground a little bit and you put a pallet down and then you plant some seeds in between the slats. So that was the very first thing we did. And our son, I think, was like, he would have been about 4 or so. So it was a kind of a fun project to do with him. We homeschool, so it's kind of bringing him in, showing him just how stuff grows and that sort of stuff. It was pretty new to us. I didn't grow up doing any of this, but you know what? That was it. That's where we got the bug for all this. So we did that. I think we had that little pallet garden for like 2 years. We grew like 4 bean plants or something out of it, but that was enough. So we got we of course got a couple of chickens. Living in town, we were allowed to have 3 chickens, no roosters. So we did that, of course. And, at the time, again, knowing nothing about chickens or anything, I remember just being terrified that they would escape and get out, and how would we ever catch them again? And, little did I know that they just come back at night. But so we started with 3 chickens in town. And then, so then we wanted to grow more, have a bigger garden. I think that's pretty typical for those of us who head down this path. And we built a slightly larger garden, put up a little fence around it, had like 5 little beds with like wood chip paths in between them and all that. And we planted our first flowers in that garden. I'll get into it later, but we do lots of flowers now. That was when we planted our first flowers, and we planted some dahlias that were dinner plate dahlias. And, they grow and they're like, 12 inches across, just gigantic and incredibly impressive. And, and then we built that garden. And then the next year we wanted to go bigger. So we start like tilling up some of the yard and whatnot in the spring. And then, but there was just this growing desire in my wife and I, well, maybe we need to move to the country and, maybe kind of explore this further and maybe we can grow more and do more out there. And, we like to spend a lot of time at, like Barnes and Noble or just like a bookshop, and we'll get all the magazines off the rack and all the books from the, the gardening or homesteading section. Mm-hmm. We'll just sit there for hours and go through that stuff and talk and dream. And, it wasn't all at once, but we just kind of, at one point we had one of those sit down meetings and we decided, you know what, let's do it. Let's find somewhere out in the country, and this was 2017. So that was a little while ago now, but we started looking. We're trying to decide, what's the list or what's the things that we want, and we didn't really know what we were looking for, and like, well, some land would be nice. And we both kind of liked the idea of like an old farmhouse, and we had been to. There's a nature center near us, and they have this big festival for maple syrup and that sort of stuff. And we're like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." I know we'd go to that with our son, and we'd see them doing that, and I knew that was a thing, but I didn't know anyone who actually did it or that people did it locally, And I'm like, "Oh, so that's cool." And there's some other things that we were interested in that were just kind of more related to the house, but then when we got to looking, it's like everything we wanted. Or everything that we wanted, it turns out it was really expensive. And so we kept looking around, and eventually we came across a place that there was a couple who were selling it. The gentleman was elderly and kind of having a hard time keeping up with maintenance and all that. So they were looking to move. They had been there for 50 years, and Well, we put an offer in on the house before we even had our house on the market, and they accepted it. So um, it was incredible because it has like everything we wanted. It's 10 acres, an old farmhouse. We have gigantic maple trees surrounding the house. Um, there's some woods, there's a stream, there's a pond. Like
Wow.
it's just great. But of course, it's not always when you find what you're looking for, sometimes you got to make some trade-offs. So one of the trade-offs is, like I said, the maintenance. The house is in decent shape, but the property had been let go. There's lots of trees growing out of the foundation of big barns. So there's lots of trees growing out of the foundation of that had to be taken care of. Just lots of kind of wild, overgrown, brushy stuff all over the place. So so we ended up moving out here, which is where we live now. And like I said, so that was in the summer of 2017, and we had some ups and downs. We had some real big ups and downs with this because when we moved out in 17, so that was in the middle of the summer. So like the garden that we had started in town, we just basically had to abandon to the new owners, but it was too late to really start a new garden.
Mm-hmm.
So then the next year, again, we're still pretty much novices at all this, but what we did is, remember, just up the road there's a rental place, and I went and rented a sod cutter. So I go out in the yard, cut up the sod, big rectangle like 24 by 24 square feet, and pull that all out. And we're like, all right, great. And let's put some seeds in the ground. And we did that, but it turns out our soil has a lot of clay, and we basically had a swimming pool. And our garden that first year was like a complete loss. And and it was such kind of a bummer because it was like we moved out here to grow more stuff, to explore this further and see where this could take us, and but it just, again, we literally made a swimming pool. I remember we had some rain, the water didn't drain at all. It filled up, you cut the side, you cut out like 2 or 3 inches of the top, and it like just filled with water to the brim. So basically a complete loss that first year. The second year, we had gotten more chickens, and we had been using our leaves from our maples as like the bedding for the chickens. And then we'd pull all of those leaves out and put that in the garden. So the second year we did that on half the garden, and we had the same problem with the clay and the non-drainage, but the area where we put all the leaves from the chickens, we had tons of volunteers from the chicken litter. So we grew tons of pumpkins by accident, but like a lot of other stuff didn't do that great. But so then going on, from there, we figured out, like, all right, we need to build up instead of trying to grow in this clay. We need to start building up. So we started building some raised beds, and when we built these raised beds, everything we've done out here has kind of been on a shoestring, right? And that's kind of the homesteader's way, in a sense that you're always kind of using free or recycled items, whatever you can find that was left here, or on Craigslist and Facebook and all that. And so we built some raised beds, and I found a guy who would deliver to me composted cow manure from his. He just needed it gone, so he brought it out and he delivered it and dropped it off at my place and everything. We filled our beds with that, and that worked really well. Things grew like crazy in there. That's all
pure compost, huh?
Yeah, just pure.
Wow, good.
Over top the clay. At that same time, so that's like 2020 now. So in the year 2020, with everything that happened, but so we're at home with some extra time. I had a friend come over, and we cleared kind of a little wooded area, and we filled that area with rows of elderberry. So we found on our property wild elderberry, and we propagated that and built out rows. So now I have a little like elderberry orchard, which is one of the things we do. And then going on, so in 21 we added a orchard and a bigger no-till area, and then that's when we got really serious about flowers. As you said, on the Facebook page, you'd see that we have a couple Facebook pages actually, but on our farm page, we do lots of flowers. Flower farming is kind of our main thing actually right now on the farm. And so in 21, we got really serious about flowers. And then let's see, last year in 22, we added more raised beds with more compost, but we had big compost issues. where nothing would grow in the compost. And that was a whole new, thing we had to discover and figure out. Which again, we could talk about all this stuff in more detail.
Yeah. I'm just letting you kind of roll. I didn't want to interrupt you. You're kind of giving us the whole layout here. And I've already heard several things I want to go back and touch on.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about all this stuff in more detail. But and then this last growing season was definitely our best season yet as far as success with things growing well, and then also selling stuff. And again, the main thing being flowers there. Yeah, but then my wife sometimes gives me a little bit of a hard time because I'm a little all over the place as far as what I want to do next or what I want to grow or whatever. And she's always like, "Why do you want to do that?" Or "What's that?" And I've really been thinking a lot about what makes me tick, or what undergirds all of this. And for our farm, so we have a verse from the Bible that's kind of like our foundational verse for what we do at the farm, which is Psalm 113:3. It's from the rising of the sun to the setting of the same, the name of the Lord shall be praised. So we try to make sure whatever we do, it's for the glory of the Lord from beginning to end. And then the other thing that has always been on my mind since we've moved here is a story from the Old Testament, 2 Kings verse 4, where there's an old lady who goes to Elijah, and her husband has passed away, and their debtors are coming to take the kids, and she wants help because she has this debt she can't pay. He says, "What do you have? What do you already have that we can use?" And she says, "All I have is a little jar of oil." And so Elijah's response is, "Well, go borrow empty jugs and jars from all your neighbors, and then just pour out from that one jar into those jugs." And she does. And, lo and behold, every jar is filled until she runs out. And then he says, "Go sell the oil and live on the rest." So the Lord can use what we already have and multiply it. And we can, pay off our debt. We can earn a living and an income and live off of that. So those,
yeah, exactly.
Those two instances from the Bible, guide us on the farm. But then as far as like my personal passion, and again, this is kind of where my sometimes chaos in what I like to grow and do comes from, is I really like to figure out and help others like save money, increase profits, build resiliency, and like personal sustainability on their farm, and then also reduce reliance on external inputs. So whether things are going well for them personally, or in for the weather or whatever, or if things are going poorly, how can you handle that? Can you still have everything that you have on the farm? Can you still make it grow? Can you still feed your family well, and so on? So that's really what drives me, is that desire to figure out how to and help others save the money, increase profits, build the resiliency and the sustainability.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that everything you said, the thing that just hit me right off the bat was it all started with a few seeds in the ground. And I love that. I love that you just pallet garden, dropped a few seeds, and this it just sparked something in you guys that made you want to go further and further. And every step was another step. And I love that it was small. You started small. Yeah. And I talked to a lot of people who they want everything and they want it now, but there's just something to be said about just starting with just one or two little things and letting things just kind of organically kind of happen from there. And you'll expand to the next thing and the next thing, and you'll get a passion for something else and you'll grow. And I love that. I mean, it's kind of the way it happened for me. And I think it happens for a lot of people that way, but it just starts with a few seeds in the ground. And I always figure if I can just get people to do that, that's a great start,
Yeah, and I remember coming home, my wife had, again, it's like one of these Pinterest ideas where you bury the pallet in the ground and it looks great. But, so she's like, "I want you to get a pallet and put it in the ground and we're going to grow seeds." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, why are we putting a pallet in the ground? And what are we growing seeds for? Like, all that stuff's at the grocery store, right?" But yeah, I mean, it really did spark that love and interest for.
And you were doing quite a bit in town. I mean, you had some chickens, you had some garden going on, you were doing a few things. I mean, I love that you didn't let where you were at stop that from happening. You made something happen.
Yeah. And exactly, that's what I was just going to say, is like, you don't have to wait. Like, I feel like so often, and I do this too, where you end up waiting, like, "Oh, if I just have this tool, or if I just have this, or when this happens, then I can do what I want to do, or then I can pursue that." Where it's like, you can start where you're at. You know what I mean? Like, there's something you could do. What do you already have, and what can you do with it?
I don't know how many times I've thought like that too. It's like, it's like I think about things I want to do, and I'm like, but look at how many things I could do with what I already have, and I could just get out there and start doing them, and I'm not doing. Let's focus on those things. It's like these things they're here. You accumulated these things. They're things that you've happened to land on over the years or whatever, and it's just sitting there. Use it. Use what you have, or borrow it. If you got a neighbor that has something that you need to get something started, borrow it. I mean, just get going.
Yeah, I have a great neighbor who has access to some heavy machinery. So once in a while, we had one of our frost-free hydrants bust last year, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, like another thing, I got to dig down 4 feet by hand, to find this leak.
Yeah.
But then, sure enough, he came over one day. He's like, "Hey, where's it at? Let's get going." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Like, I guess we're fixing the hydrant today." So
I've been there. I've done this. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Okay, so you've obviously got your little farm going on, few acres, doing the flowers. I mean, what are you're calling it a farm, not just a homestead. I mean, I think you're a homesteader, but you're farming because you're doing things for profit. Yeah. What is your business as far as the farm goes?
Yeah. So right now the flowers has been the main thing. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then I think when you first noticed some of my online activity through the fodder trees, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's a kind of a new budding business. And so one of the things I'm working on right now is developing and expanding a little nursery that I have. I'd like to ultimately focus on selling bare root as opposed to like potted plants. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's just a lot of limits, and the plants aren't usually, I don't know. I don't like the quality of the plants as much when they're in a pot versus like a bare root.
Certainly shipping would be cheaper.
Yeah. Shipping is, prohibitive when you're talking about like potted plants and all that. Mm-hmm. So that's, like I said, this last year we focused a lot on flowers. We've done pretty well with that. We've had a lot of learning, but a lot of success recently. And then again, the fodder trees. And I feel like the fodder trees really hit at the heart of like building this resiliency into your homestead. And I feel like there's kind of a lack of knowledge out there just in general. It's almost like it's like a forgotten art or technology. This was done for thousands of years in the past. And, there's kind of this renewed interest. And part of it's because like, the cost of like feed has gone up in the last few years. And trying to keep animals through the winter and all that. And like, this is some of the things that like, these fodder trees can help with. So yeah. So right now, like you're asking is, we're selling fodder trees and then part of that again is trying to just expand the nursery.
What's your, how do you sell things? What's your business like? You just sell things off the farm, or you go to farmers markets? Do you just sell online? What do you do?
So I'll talk about, again, the flowers specifically. So we have a Facebook page for our farm, and so we'll try to drive some sales through that. So since we have elderberry, we make a few products with the elderberry, like we might have like an elderflower cordial. We've made some syrup in the past, but we tend to just rather sell the berries themselves, some fresh berries locally, as opposed to buying like dehydrated berries from Europe, right? Which you usually find online. But I tell you what, we've never had an issue selling the berries. Like they sell themselves, and they, you can get a good price for them. But so for the flowers though, we have a couple of main places. So we sell our cut flowers to, or there's one main restaurant that's in town here. That's like a nicer, higher end restaurant. We take flowers there every week. There's a big farm market in town, so it's not a farmer's market that we're going to sell. We deliver to this market, and they grow a lot of their own stuff, but they also aggregate some other farmers, produce and flowers and that sort of stuff. So we take flowers there, and they sell them. There's like a boutique in town that we take flowers to, where she's selling them bouquets out of there. And then there's a what I'd call a farm store. So it's another farm, a big blueberry farm actually. And they have a store where people can come in and, buy several other products, but we're also taking bouquets there regularly. So we have, thinking about lifestyle and what do we want to do? We've decided we don't want to go sit at a farmer's market every Saturday or spend a whole day doing that. So we've made some contacts in the community. So one of the things we like about doing the flowers and selling it into the community this way is that we like sharing that beauty with the community, And then it also doesn't require us to go to a farmer's market and hope to sell. You know what I mean? Like things
Right.
are already sold. We're cutting for things that are already sold.
Yeah, I like that business plan a lot better as far as having a direct customer like that that's going to buy stuff every week or however often you have them. I mean, that's nice. I mean, then setting up and just hoping something sells. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know how many times we're out cutting flowers this year, and I told my wife, I'm like, it's so much nicer knowing these are already sold. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
much more enjoyable work. So,
I agree.
the
Yeah.
thing too that you need to, keep in mind if you're trying to sell stuff off the farm is like it's easy. Usually the problem isn't growing what you want to sell. It's the selling, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's easy to outgrow what you have sold. So again, if you can have it all sold ahead of time, it really helps.
How did you go about getting customers like that? You just knock on doors and
Well, okay, so my wife's very outgoing and very personable, and she does a very good job making friends and contacts. So I'm originally from this area. She's from another town about an hour away. We met in college, and it wasn't. She didn't live here but a couple of years. I'm like, she knows more people than I do. Like we go out.
social butterfly, huh?
People recognize her, not me. So it's okay. That's fine. But anyway, so she's the one that made those initial contacts. But honestly, it's not as hard as I thought it would be to make those initial contacts. Even like just a Facebook message that says, "Hey, this is what we do. Here's a link to our farm, and can we come in and talk to you about this sometime? Or we'd like to maybe supply flowers to the tables on your restaurant every week." And everyone, like, I don't know, like, what's the worst someone's gonna say? It's no thanks. You know what I mean? Which we've had plenty of that, or just no response. But just kind of asking and saying, hey, maybe I can stop by and drop off a couple bouquets for you to just check out.
That's good. I think that's really helpful for a lot of folks who, like you said, they're growing things, but selling is the hard part. Hooking up customers is the more difficult part. There's a lot of people who, they want to grow microgreens, but they know that the marketing of those microgreens might be the hardest part of that. Or just, a lot of people default to the farmer's market just because they don't know any other way, or they think it's just the easiest way to sell this stuff rather than, go out and get the customers directly.
Well, farmers markets have gotten like really popular. Like the one in town here, it just got huge over the last handful of years. And I feel like that's super saturated. Like it's going to be harder to stand out at the farmers market than, if you have good marketing on, like, say, your Facebook page or something.
Which probably not a lot of people selling flowers there anyway, though. That probably is a pretty unique thing to have at a farmer's market, though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, again, flower farming got really popular starting in 2020, like a lot of them. And so it seems like, when we first, we're kind of dabbling in it, we put some stuff out by the road, but we don't sell a lot by the road, but we put a little bit out there, and stuff would sell. And then like 2020, and then it's like, oh, well, nothing's selling, because now when you drive around, there's a flower stand on almost every corner out here in
really?
The country.
Wow.
However, I do think that's kind of like starting to reverse itself, or some people are kind of getting out of it, or we're doing it more as a hobby or just for fun during that time. So
yeah. Now you're selling your elderberries and probably a few other things too. Is it pretty much the same way? You're just kind of packaging those up and selling them on your Facebook, or what are you doing there?
Yeah. And, part of it is just a friends network, because, we homeschool, and there's plenty of people in the homeschool community who, are looking for elderberries to make their own syrup. So that's, again, not a hard sell, but there's just enough people out there in general, that are on our farm page. And if we got them, we'll just post that we have them. Again, they kind of sell themselves. We haven't had the biggest harvest. We've been able to sell everything we've harvested. This was our 4th year with the elderberries, and actually my harvest was not great this year, and that's because I coppiced them completely to the ground, and they didn't recover as well as I expected. But it'll be amazing next year. So
yeah.
And last year was better than this year. So anyway,
I usually cut mine back to about 2 or 3 feet tall, and then they seem to go really well from there. I haven't tried cutting any completely to the ground. Yeah.
And I mean, they came back and some of them grew 14 feet tall. Like they're insane.
Yeah. I got one like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have about 70 of them like that. So
Yeah. I got some that are like 7, 8 feet tall, but I have one that just has the perfect, I don't know if just the ground right there, the moisture levels, the sunlight, everything must just be perfect. Cause it's probably over 14, 15. Yeah, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Again, like I mentioned earlier, with our ground being clay, it's pretty wet when we get big rains. Everyone out in this area calls it mud season in the spring. And but like elderberry loves the wet, so maybe it's not great for growing other things like carrots or something, but elderberry just loves it. It goes nuts. A lot of our property is kind of a low lying, it's the stream kind of meanders through, and in the spring the river or the stream will flood, kind of flood the area. And so we just have to be careful where we place stuff. That's a little further from the house, so that's not too much of a concern, but just in general, the property is pretty wet. But there are, again, learning like what do we have and how can we work with it. And part of it was, again, raised beds. Part of it's elderberries love it. Willow trees, the poplar trees and all that stuff. They definitely love it.
Yeah, well, so that takes us to the next thing you're doing, which is the fodder trees. Now that's pretty new for you. You're really just now getting that established and rolling. But how long have you actually been building that? You started doing that when?
Yeah, so this is my first year actually.
Okay.
Make this a serious business, the fodder trees, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah. And then as we had talked before, but one of my goals here is I have a certain portion of my property. It's about an acre that I want to slowly convert it into like a silvopasture that'll integrate fodder trees into it that can be used for tree hay, but also just for the animals to graze off of. Again, it's kind of low lying. It gets kind of wet. But it's also right now there's trees on it. There's lots of invasive like honeysuckle growing all over it, and but then I ultimately want to turn it into an area that's like for demonstrative purposes, right? So people can come visit and see what I'm doing, but also make some YouTube videos or whatever, just showing and demonstrating how this can be done on a small scale, right? A lot of times this is pretty small scale, but a lot of people will have an acre that maybe they can devote to something like this, to a silvopasture. And then I kind of want to try to push it to its limits. How much, how many animals can you put on it? Like how much can you produce off of that? And how much of your own, hay and feed and fodder can you put away for the winter, to make it through the whole season when you don't have grass or something else growing.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what's your storage plans on that tree hay?
Yeah. So I have, like I said, we have an old barn. So the plan is in the hay loft of the barn, just like how you'd store hay. If you cut it, if you pollard or coppice it, and then you get these long branches growing that are all pretty uniform, you can cut those and bundle them up. And you want to keep them out of the sun, but you want to give them a little bit of air movement, so they can dry out some. But then yeah, they can just go right upstairs, store in big bundles, and then whenever you need a bundle, you just bring it down. And then but it's almost like a 1-to-1 equivalent with hay as far as, on a weight basis, right? So, you can think about, if you have like a square bale and, say it's a 40-pound or 50-pound bale, you just need to put up an equivalent amount of weight of tree hay. Or even if you don't want to completely replace the hay, you can do it by percentages, right? Maybe
now, are you talking about the weight, branch and all, or just the leaves, or what are you talking about there?
Yeah, it's primarily with the leaves because that's what they're going to be eating, right?
Depends on the animal, I guess. If you had like goats and rabbits and things like that for tree hay, they'll eat actually all of it. But
and they're going to be, and most animals they'll nibble on the tips of the branches.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, if you put it up, and again, you don't have to replace all of your hay needs, but if you can reduce your bill by, your hay bill for 20%, 50%, some people are looking at in the fall time trying to spend $2,000-$3,000 to put up some hay for some animals, just to make it through the winter when there's nothing growing until, next April or something. So if you can just reduce that can make the difference of, keeping the animals through the winter or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've played around with it a little bit. I mean, I'll put up, because I just have rabbits that are eating that, and I'll put up mulberry for them, and it works pretty well, and they really like it.
Yeah, willow with them too.
I don't have any willow on my property, but I could absolutely if I had them. But mostly I'm just doing, I just have mulberry is what I'm feeding them, and comfrey. I do comfrey leaves too. I do dry a bunch of that and put comfrey leaves up for to feed them through the winter time, and that works out really well too.
Yeah, I have a bunch of comfrey that I've started, and it's amazing how big it can get.
Yeah, and I mean, when it dries, though, it's amazing how small it can get. Though it dries
Yeah.
up pretty tight. It actually dries really fast, and it shrivels up pretty good. So you need quite a bit of it. But fortunately, like you said, you get quite a bit of it if you have a lot of plants, and then you just keep cutting it and keep putting it up, and it just keeps growing back. As a few weeks later, you cut it again. It's really fast producing.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a whole block out back that I got like tree starts and all that going, and this next year, I guess this winter, probably late in the winter, I'll be able to cut those down, and those will all grow back, really vigorous for next year. And then, it's just the amount of plants you have just explodes, right? You start with a handful, and you can put those in the ground, and then next thing you know, you're propagating off of those, and you get hundreds and thousands of them really fast.
Yeah. So what trees are you selling?
Yeah. So I kind of always say like the basic three to start with are going to be your willow, poplar, and then the mulberry. You said the mulberry. So yeah, the willow, poplar, and the mulberry. So those are the ones that are pretty much just safe for anything, right? So anything that's a normal herbivore can just eat those, and you don't need to worry about it. Then beyond that, so that'd be like for tree hay, or of course, you can make silage out of that too if you wanted to put in that extra effort. But then there's some advantages to that too. But then other than that, I also have chestnut trees. They're just like hybrid chestnuts. And then also honey locust, which is good for the pods, which, it can take a while before your trees start producing pods. But those pods are really good to put up. There's kind of like they call it honey locust because there's a thick gel in between the seeds. It's kind of sweet. There's lots of calories in there and protein in there for the animals.
Yeah. Not to be confused with black locust pods. It's honey locust. Yeah. There's a big difference.
Yeah,
there.
The honey locusts are usually a lot longer, and they're kind of like gold. But the trees kind of look similar. The leaves are very similar.
Yeah. I have a blog post I wrote a while back on the differences of them, and there's quite a few differences as far as and the use of them too. A lot of differences. So just make sure you got the right trees there.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
So you're selling those ones, or do you have any? Are they hybrid varieties, or are they more local native variety?
So that's a good question. So the hybrid, so the poplar and the willow are both hybrids. So, and the reason for that is because generally they'll grow faster. You can get more biomass faster that way. They'll get established faster, and they'll be producing for you faster. You can use what you can find wildly, right? So like just any willow that you find, any mulberry that's wild on your property, all that stuff can be used. And it just maybe genetics are going to vary, so maybe they won't grow as fast as the hybrids will. Probably
be a good thing to do to plant both, and so you could get some quick, but then you get that longer established, more durable, native variety also. So you can get leaves quick and get the other later.
Yeah, especially if it's already acclimated to your region, the country and your climate. So there's definitely some advantages to that too.
Yeah, that's good. So you're selling this stuff, and right now you're selling it in the pots, but you're trying to get it maybe switched over to selling bare root.
So right now I have bare root sales going, so we're taking orders, which will ship in the spring. Like I said, that's open now, but then talking about things that are potted, it's more just for local sales. Anything that's potted, So I have some like just general things like some hostas and other ornamentals and that sort of stuff that I have in pots that are just more for I'm really interested in the plant propagation and how how there is money to be made there, but also there's again like beauty to be shared, in the ornamentals and that sort of stuff. So
yeah. But I don't know what Michigan's like, but are there any hoops to jump through to run a nursery and sell trees and plants and things like that?
Yeah, so you need a nursery license, but it's a pretty simple process. I mean, you basically have a fee to pay. Someone will come out and inspect your plants that you have, but they're not there to make it hard on you. If you approach it more as they're there to help you, then hopefully you can have a good relationship, and it's just not a big deal. So more than anything, they're just going to point out if you have a problem, or if there's like some bugs here, then maybe you need to make sure you stay on top of that, or
which would be helpful information. Not you shouldn't look at that as like they're trying to stop me. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no, exactly. They're there to help. I mean, they're there to help prevent spread of disease and infestation and all that.
Sure.
Okay. But they're to help you do that as well.
Yeah. So it wasn't difficult. I mean, just fill out a form, get a visit, and done. Yeah. I was curious about that. I know every state's probably different. There's probably some places where it is more difficult and some places where it probably isn't nothing you got to do at all. I don't know. But yeah, I was kind of curious about that as far as on your end. Sounds like it's pretty simple in Michigan, though. They're pretty friendly about it.
Yeah. And is my impression is that most places it is pretty simple. Like it's not something you're worried about or concerned about. It's just, go through the process and you'll be fine.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I definitely want to, I'll definitely put links in so people can find, your information and if they want to get a tree or off of you or talk to you about it. But you also just have kind of informational places people can go to. I mean, you have Facebook page, you have a couple of Facebook pages, I guess, and groups and website and, you got your YouTube channel even. So you've got some good educational stuff out there as well.
Yeah. So, I'll just plug this stuff real quick, but our website is www.sunshineacres.farm. So it's sunshine. Sun is spelled with an O as in the sun. So sunshineacres.farm. On Facebook is also Sunshine Acres. There you'll see a lot of our most recently, like our flower post over the last year and that sort of stuff. Then there's a Facebook group called Silvopasture, Tree Hay, and Tree Fodder for Beginners. And that's a relatively new group, but I'm actually surprised at how fast it's been growing.
It's rocking. I've been kind of keeping track of it, and you guys are adding a lot of members every day.
People coming in constantly. Every time I look, I'm surprised there's another 8 people, 10, 25 people.
Yeah, it's blowing up.
It's encouraging. I mean, but again, it just shows that there's the interest out there. People want to learn. When people asking questions about how to do this, we have other people who are trying to help. So, definitely look into that Facebook group. And then I also have the YouTube channel, which is called The Grateful Grow. And again, that's kind of a new channel. I'm just starting out there, but I'd love to have you along for the ride as we work on developing the nursery and developing, a demonstration silvopasture.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're doing some good things there. I mean, like I said, you're sharing a lot of good information and you're helping people and get established and get some ideas on maybe what they want to do. I think you're doing some really good stuff there.
Yeah, cool. And again, like I said, I really want to just inspire people to look at what do you have? What can you do with what you already have? And then there's tons of ways to build in resiliency and reduce your need for external inputs, right? We don't need to be buying fertilizer all the time.
Right. Yeah. So I know you got some chickens, but is there any other livestock you have right now?
Yeah. So right now, actually, we just got rid of our chickens. Every once in a while, we'll just kind of get a flock and then start over. Yeah. So the chickens is the main thing that we've done. Like I said, I want to get some goats and I want to use those goats to clear the land that the silvopasture go on. So that's going to be the plan there. And then also I want to probably integrate some sheep into that as well, that process, and to kind of explore the differences in how well they can clear the land. They have kind of different needs and what they like to graze on. Yeah. So, we've done various things with rabbits, mostly rabbits and chickens is where we've kind of stayed. Okay. But the rabbits have been gone for a little while. We were actually looking at them, or we were doing, they're Angoras, French Angora rabbits. So we were getting all the fur and all that. And we got some, nice blankets and that sort of stuff made off of those. But
yeah, well, that'd be interesting to see. You're going to take this 1 acre and make this silvopasture in 1 acre. It'll be interesting to see just how well that works with a few animals and just the rotational grazing of that through there, just on 1 acre, even on a small scale, and see how that really works. Because like you said, there's a lot of people that they'll be able to apply that to their homestead who don't have, 50, 60, 80 acres or whatever. They have maybe 3 or 4 or 5 acres, and they can take an acre or 2 and do something like that with. That'd be really good for them to see how that works and how well, and just how much you can feed an animal from that.
Yeah, and how many homesteaders have you talked to that only have 3 acres or 2 acres, 5 acres, and if you can just use one and use it to support any of your meat needs or livestock, then let's see how far we can push that. I know you do a lot of stuff and just a small little bit, like
quarter acre here. We're doing quite a bit, and even some silvopasture. I would say we take the tractors and run it through the the stuff, and it works the same way.
Yeah, and then even everything that we grow is all in. It's about an acre or less, really. A lot of people who do flowers, they're doing like 100-foot rows. And they'll have a whole bunch of rows, but we're just using a little. They're 4 by 16-foot raised beds, and so our actual planted square footage is quite small.
Yeah. I don't think folks realize just how little space it takes to grow a lot of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you can get really intensive about it and almost get crazy and overdo it, but at the same time, it doesn't take, and I've probably done that, but it doesn't take as much room as people think to grow a significant amount of food and other things, even cash crops like you're doing.
Yeah, that's what I tend to keep doing with my tomatoes. Is I keep planting too many, too close.
No, it's easy, isn't it?
Training turns into a nightmare every year. But
yeah, especially those cherry tomatoes. These things will turn into a jungle. I know I've grew those things. You throw about 7 or 8 of those things on, you'll have so many cherry tomatoes, and you got like this jungle of cherry tomatoes. You can't get to half of them.
I know exactly. Yeah, and then yeah.
So what's next for you and your wife and the Sunshine Acres Farm? What's going? What you got? Other plans going on, or anything you're thinking about?
Well, this is kind of the main thing. We're going to keep pushing on the flowers, and then we're trying to build up this tree fodder and nursery business, and then as well as trying to build the YouTube. And realistically, like YouTube's kind of like a marketing, but like I also want to share what we're doing and how it works and how you can apply it too. So
yeah,
the main things we're going to be focusing on next.
Yeah, well, you're doing some really good stuff, man. Is there anything you want to leave folks with before I let you go?
No, I don't think so. But again, just really, it's just what I said already. It's like, what do you already have? What can you already do with it? And you don't need as much as maybe you think you need. And you don't need to wait for this one thing or that one tool to get started.
Yeah, I agree. Well, good word. I think that you're doing some great stuff. I look forward to seeing all the things you're going to be sharing in your Facebook group, and folks can reach out to you there. You're also a member of the Homestead Front Porch Facebook group, so people can reach out to you there. That's actually where I first seen a message from you in there. So they can come into my group and see you in there as well, sharing things. So I think you're doing some great stuff, and I look forward to seeing where it goes for you. And I think you shared some really valuable tips for folks here, especially on the marketing side of things. So I think a lot of folks, I think with farmers, we're hands-on. We want to get out there and do. Yeah. And maybe that part's a little elusive to us. It's like, okay, now what do I do with it? Because my desire is not to be a salesman. My desire is to grow things. So I love that you shared some great tips there for folks.
I love growing plants. Like my passion's more with the plants rather than the animals. My passion's more with the plants. And it's definitely not with marketing,
Right. So. That's right. Well, I appreciate you, Steve. You're doing some great stuff, and keep it up, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks a lot.